Let's be honest. Have you ever looked at the world around you and just felt like something is deeply, fundamentally wrong? Like you're screaming for answers and getting nothing but silence? Well, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're diving into the story of an ancient prophet who did exactly that. He wrestled with God in this raw, honest argument that feels like it could have been written yesterday.
This is the question that kicks off the entire book of Habakkuk. And it's not some gentle philosophical inquiry. No, it's a desperate cry from a man watching his entire society just fall apart, wondering why a good and all-powerful God seems to be doing absolutely nothing about it.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our guy, Habakkuk, is a prophet living in the final, chaotic days of the kingdom of Judah, and things are bad. I mean, the nation is just rotting from the inside out with corruption and violence. And right in the middle of all this chaos, God is silent. And it's the silence that pushes Habakkuk to his breaking point.
Now, what's really fascinating here is just how different Habakkuk is from other prophets of his time. You take someone like his contemporary, Zephaniah. Zephaniah was a public announcer, you know? He stood up and warned the people, this is what the Lord says. But Habakkuk? He turns the prophecy inward. The book isn't a speech to the people. It's an argument with God. It's a deeply personal crisis of faith playing out on a national stage. I mean, just listen to his words. They paint such a stark picture of how bad things had gotten. He says the law is paralyzed. It's totally powerless. Justice is perverted. It's all twisted and bent, used as a weapon by the wicked instead of a shield for the innocent. This is the world that's making him scream. So he just unleashes his first complaint. And this is a direct challenge. He's not just asking a question, he's basically accusing God of being negligent. How long do I have to shout before you listen? Why are you just sitting there watching all this happen? It's so raw, so honest, and it's a feeling I think many of us can relate to. And then God answers. But oh boy, it is absolutely not the answer Habakkuk, or frankly anyone, was expecting. God breaks his silence with a plan that is so shocking, it makes the original problem seem kind of small by comparison.
So, God's solution to the injustice inside Judah is to send the Babylonians, an empire famous for its brutality and its ruthlessness. God basically says, you think things are bad now? You just wait. I'm going to send an even more wicked nation to come and clean house. You then just imagine Habakkuk's horror.
And make no mistake, this was not some idle threat. At this point in history, Babylon was on this terrifying upward trajectory. They had just crushed the supposedly invincible Assyrian Empire and were fast becoming the undisputed superpower of the ancient world. These guys were real, they were powerful, and they were headed straight for Judah. The book describes them as a people who literally worship their own power. It says they make sacrifices to the very weapons they use to conquer other nations. So let's be crystal clear. God isn't using some righteous nation to punish an unrighteous one. He's using a brutal, godless empire. And this new reality just plunges Habakkuk into an even deeper crisis. See, his first question was, God, why don't you do something? His second, much deeper question is, how could you possibly do that? And this is the real theological heart of the entire book. Habakkuk starts his second complaint by stating what he knows to be true about God's character. He says, look, I know you're holy, I know you're righteous, and you can't even stand to look at evil. And laying this foundation makes his next question all the more powerful. And there it is, the central paradox. God, if you are too pure to even look at evil, how can you actively use a nation that is even more evil than we are as your chosen tool? How does that make any sense at all? It's a question that cuts right to the heart of what divine justice is. So God's final answer, it isn't a simple explanation. Instead of just giving Habakkuk a neat little answer to satisfy his curiosity, God gives him a vision, a core principle to live by that will get the faithful through the coming storm. God tells Habakkuk to get ready. He says, go stand at your post, like a watchman on a tower, and wait for the answer. And when it comes, I want you to write it down so clearly that someone can read it while running past. This message is meant to be urgent, it's permanent, and it's designed to last. And this is the vision. This one short sentence becomes one of the most foundational statements in the entire Bible. The answer to how you survive the chaos, the injustice, the confusion. It isn't about having all the intellectual answers. It's about trust. The righteous person will endure by holding on to God, especially when nothing makes sense. And it's really important to understand that when the text says faith, it means something so much deeper than just believing something in your head. The original Hebrew word emunah is really better translated as faithfulness. It's this idea of a lifestyle of integrity, of steadfastness, of reliability that grows out of your trust in God. It's an active, enduring loyalty. And God reassures Habakkuk that justice isn't being ignored. He issues these 5 woes, which are kind of like formal declarations of doom against Babylon. He promises that their violence, their greed, their arrogance, none of it will go unpunished. The very things they use to build their empire will be the exact reason it gets destroyed. Justice, he says, is coming for everyone. This whole exchange completely transforms Habakkuk. I mean, he doesn't get a neat, tidy explanation for everything, but what he gets is a whole new perspective. The final chapter of the book shows us this incredible journey he takes from desperate doubt to this defiant, powerful devotion. So how does he get there? He remembers. His prayer in chapter 3 isn't about his current problems at all. It's this powerful poem retelling God's might in the past, how God delivered Israel from Egypt, parting the sea, marching like a warrior. Remembering God's faithfulness in the past gives him the strength he needs to trust God for the future. It's really an amazing character arc. The book starts with Habakkuk in the pits of despair, questioning God, but it ends with him standing on the heights of faith, expressing a trust that is so much deeper and more resilient than before. And all of this leads to his final, absolutely breathtaking declaration. He paints a picture of total devastation, the complete collapse of the economy, the loss of all food, livestock, everything. It's a scenario where literally all the visible blessings of life have just vanished. Yet, that has to be one of the most powerful yets in all of literature. He says, even if I lose everything, I will still find my joy in God. His trust is no longer based on his circumstances. His joy is now rooted in the character of God alone. The God who he now trusts will bring ultimate justice because he's proven himself faithful time and time again through history. And that, right there, is the heart of Habakkuk's message. He shows us that real faith isn't about having no doubts. It's not about getting all your questions answered. It's about making a conscious choice to trust, to remain faithful, right in the messy, confusing middle of the pain. It's about looking at the chaos and still being able to say, yet. So Habakkuk's ancient story leaves us with this huge question. In our own lives, when we face things that feel unjust or make absolutely no sense, what does it actually look like for us to live by faithfulness? It's an ancient question that I think demands a fresh answer from every single one of us today.